Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of our new Tech Talk series, Simplifying Continuous Delivery with Spinnaker. My name's Bo Roberts. I run marketing for OpsumX, and I'm joined today by our speakers, Nirmalya Sen and Gopi Rabala. Just in terms of introductions, Nirmalya is Senior Director of Engineering at OpsumX. Nirmalya has worked for companies like Oracle, Cisco, and startups like MapR, and I believe the pronunciation is Dremo, building and delivering cloud services for customers. He's faced the challenges of continuous delivery and wants to solve that for customers with OpsumX. Gopi is OpsumX Chief Technology Officer, and Gopi's worked for Fortune 100 companies and startups building and delivering cloud infrastructure and application software at scale. He understands problems faced by organizations in software delivery and plans to make automation simpler for reliable delivery. For those of you who may be new to OpsumX, we're a Silicon Valley-based startup. We're based in Sunnyvale, California. We help enterprises and organizations modernize and transform their software delivery with Spinnaker. We provide an enterprise distribution of Spinnaker called Open Enterprise Spinnaker. And we provide training, maintenance, and support services that help enterprises deploy and scale their continuous delivery. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions you'd like to submit for our Q&A that we'll do at the end, you can do that by entering those questions into the GoToWebinar control panel. If you would like to actually ask your question during the Q&A, simply send us a message through the question function saying you'd like to ask a question, and when we get to the Q&A, you can raise your hand. There's a button on the control panel to raise your hand, and when you do that, I will unmute you, and you can engage with our speakers today. So with that, I think we're going to kick things off. So welcome, Nirmalya and Gopi. We have an interesting topic today, I think, simplifying continuous delivery with Spinnaker. Let me kick things off with just, a question to just get us started. Maybe for some of the people who may not be familiar with continuous delivery or some of the more, nuanced aspects of it, and maybe Spinnaker. So what I would say is, let's start off with, can you guys define what is exactly continuous delivery? How do you guys see continuous delivery? And let's do that to get us kicked off.
Sure, I'll take that. Continuous delivery is actually a pretty newer concept that's gaining mainstream recognition these days. Typically, what has been the process is that the development teams would be basically building their code and test it, and once it's ready and they've certified it's ready to go, it would be tossed over the wall from the development team to the operations team, right? And then the operations team will take that and do their own sanity tests on it. They will install it on staging environment, run performance test, security test, and all that. And once they're satisfied, then they'll push it out to production, which is to make sure that they're only pushing out quality software out there, making sure that there are no bugs, they don't get downtime, or security leaks and breaches, and just to make sure you don't get a CNN moment over there. So that's pretty good, right? Like you're delivering quality software. So what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that it's a waterfall model between the development and the operations team. When the operations team is doing their testing, performance, security scans, and they're probably doing some integration testing. Issues can be found at that stage, and then it goes back to development to fix it. That's a typical problem with a waterfall model, right? You're finding issues late in the cycle. And as we all know, that cost of fixing those issues is pretty high if you find them late in the development process. So what that leads to is pretty longer release cycles, which means time to market is longer. And when you have longer release cycles, there are other effects that come into play, is that your releases are bloated, a lot more features get added in. In fact, what I've seen is that product managers will put their foot down to get some of their features in, because they know if they don't get that feature in this release, they have to wait another 12 plus months to get that feature in. So it's a question about time to market. So more and more features gets added in, the release becomes bloated, and you have to do more testing. So in fact, the releases, to get a quality release out, it becomes more complex. And that's why, traditional software releases have been 18 months plus. So what's basically the need of the hour? It's being able to go to market faster and make quality releases at the same time. Doesn't mean go to market means you compromise on quality. So you want to basically do quality releases at a lower risk, right? And at the same time, everyone is trying to lower the cost. So that is what continuous delivery is all about, is basically being able to make low risk, high quality releases at a regular cadence.
That's exactly right. So we intuitively think moving faster makes it less reliable. Part of the reason is because we think moving faster, you do less amount of verification, which causes failures. But what we have seen in the statistics on people who have adopted continuous delivery is that as they move faster, their software is getting more reliable. And so how is that, right? As a developer should recognize, if you make code changes a small number of lines, then it's easier to code review, get it right the first time, and make a release. But at the same time, if you're doing hundreds of thousands of lines of code change, you really can't do a good code review for that in a reasonable way. And the testing also gets more complex, and you have to wait a lot longer to release those things. So that's where you want to do small changes, but be able to get it to your production environment or release environment faster. So this essentially is the basis of continuous delivery. You make small changes, get them out as quickly as possible, and also because you're basing it on a release that is already good, you can get it in a more reliable fashion. Now, one of the, of course, added advantages in software, we know as we make releases of the new features, that they don't come out exactly the way the customers would expect it or use it. Now, if you get your features out to your customers faster, now you have the ability to get the feedback quickly, identify which ones work, which ones don't. You can do A/B testing much faster and get the right product out there without spending too much time on the features that don't really work for you. So this is essentially the basis of CD: smaller releases, faster, more reliable, and ultimately it's cheaper, right? But it's not free. There are some challenges in being able to do that, but based on the existing processes, if you are doing manual handovers between different groups, then this will look challenging. And here is where the DevOps culture, or having these organizations like developers, QA, and operations working closely comes into play.
Great. So I guess the question is, what does an organization need, to take advantage of continuous delivery? Do they need to really sort of completely transform things, or how can they get started?
Yeah, they can get started focusing on the primary things that's required for CD, like automation. They don't need to completely change. There are software architectures that are more amenable to smaller incremental changes than, say, monolith applications where builds are taking hours to do and the testing takes days to do. But you can achieve that for all kinds of software. The main thing here is being able to make these small changes continuously, being able to test them, and also automate some of these handover processes. The small investment made in this kind of automation for the release process goes a long way. We've seen these examples in testing automation, with the manual testing to automated testing. There was significant investment that needed to be made for automating all your testing, but that paid off very well. With automated testing, you were able to release faster, more reliable, and ultimately it's cheaper. The same kind of a thing applies here for the continuous delivery also. One of the things that we've seen is as the continuous delivery is hitting the mainstream, people tend to think that, okay, I have a comprehensive CI system working very well. Why don't I add deployment to it? And now that's my continuous delivery. That's the quick instinct. We want to see how this deployment goes without too much of an investment. One thing that this runs into problem is the checks and balances in the process get lost. The visibility between the different groups get lost. The DevOps processes where you expect different parts of the organization work together to have it flowing seamlessly, that gets lost. So you have to be careful in how you define your continuous delivery and to really get the advantages of having this process being delivered. And you need to know what is being delivered and what are the features that went into this particular product, what is the features that it is solving, who did the testing, at what scale it was approved. You want to get that quality, scale, performance, and security in those. So this way you need to choose the right tools. And the tool shouldn't be just another tool that adds on to a bag of tools that you already have, but it should give a substantial help, not just an incremental help in your CD process.
Great. Today when we hear about continuous delivery CD, oftentimes it's in the context or in relation to microservices and adopting microservices. What about people who are still in monolith architectures? Can they adopt continuous delivery too?
Let me take that. So, well, that's absolutely a very good question, because I've seen a lot of people think that, hey, I'm monolith. Continuous delivery doesn't apply for me. Continuous delivery is for microservices. That's not true. It's absolutely they can adopt it. Like what Gopi was talking about. It's about making small incremental changes. So, if you can apply the principles of continuous delivery to monoliths, absolutely you can. What you have to do is basically you have to make sure your software is ready for release for every time, which means that all the testing that Gopi was talking about, you have to do that. Yeah, because it's a monolith, it would increase the testing time. You would need to add more automation. Maybe the testing cycles would be a little longer than if you had microservices. But you could always ensure that your software is changing incrementally, even if it's a monolith, and you are doing enough testing to make sure that your monolith is ready for deploying at any time. That's the challenging part with monoliths, like I was saying, because it's big. There's no compartmentalization of your software, so you have to work a little harder to make sure it's always ready for deployment. Typical monoliths, it's one big chunk. So if only a part of the software has changed, you still have to test the whole software for all aspects, right? To make sure it's releasable. So that basically adds to longer time, but you can still do it, right? Making sure you run through automated tests, all the tests that you typically do, you are doing it at a regular basis. With each and every code change, you're doing it. So you basically may not be deploying to production, but you are definitely going through the steps to making sure your software is ready for deployment. Another thing I think that helps for continuous delivery is having immutable resources. You will see lots of, especially microservices things. When you have to do a new delivery, you typically delete the old one and replace it by a new one. Basically, you replace your software, your data, and your config are stored in some persistent storage. So you just replace your software with the new one, and it brings up. That makes basically life easy for microservices. That would be a little harder on monoliths, which are typically not based on immutable resources. You typically have a server running, and then you apply your changes on top of that running server, and then you have to basically test and making sure it's working. It makes a little riskier, because how do you roll back? You need a complete process to roll back your software. But you have to do extra work, but you can definitely achieve continuous delivery with those extra work, and making sure when you move from test to stage to production, you have to basically run all your tests every time to make sure your software is not broken as you move from environment to environment.
Hey, Gopi, did you have something else to add?
Exactly right. So what we have seen is this monolith software, particularly the Netflix, they started with this immutable concept with VMs in EC2 environment. Later on, they did conform to the microservice architectures and made a lot more progress. But you can imagine this immutable servers as you're continuously deploying with small changes. What you want to do here is the risk manage your delivery when you're going at high velocity. You have to assume that whatever you're releasing will have some problems at some time. You cannot ignore testing, but even with testing, we know problems do happen. The idea here is once you go into production, if some problem does occur, you want to be able to recover really fast. If your service takes 10 minutes to come up, then if there is a problem that occurs, you would spend at least 10 minutes going back to a previous version that you want to roll back. So you need to have those deployment strategies like blue-green in those kind of cases to be able to recover faster. So you do have to go through some of these changes as you move faster. You need to be able to manage your risks, but it will definitely pay off in your ability to deliver faster the features and manage the risk in your environments. So using these principles, you can apply the CD principles to all types of applications. With Kubernetes microservices, the immutable containers are automatic, and you kind of get that architecture for free, but you can apply the same principles to all kinds of applications.
Great. So let's just say somebody wants to look at doing continuous delivery. What should they be looking for in terms of a CD tool?
Good. Yes, absolutely. First of all, there are lots of tools out there. So obviously the question comes in as, what should I look for? And like Gopi mentioned earlier, is that, organizations already have built-in processes invested in some tools. So first, I think, you need to look at, what sort of integration your CD tool provides with other tools that you use in your organizations. You already have a set of processes, tools that you're using. You already have CI processes, Jenkins, or whatever. You have a mature process. So you have to look at if that CD tool integrates with those tools. Second, you need to look at the support for different environments, right? Organization environments are not homogeneous. They've evolved over time, and you have to have different infrastructure from bare metal hardware to VM, and organizations these days are moving more and more towards containers. So you have to look at if the tool provides support for different types of infrastructure resources that's there in your organization. You don't want multiple tools for each type of infrastructure you have. Also, you need to look at where your organization is going. Today, you may be based on VMs, but there is a big push to go to containers. Like, if you look at any company, the CIO has Kubernetes in their plan. So you have to basically make sure you're investing in a tool that will take you into the future, and that in a couple of years you don't need to re-architect, refactor, or reevaluate another tool. At least for the next 5-6 years, you are set. Next, what you need to look at is that does the tool provide you visibility and control to all the stakeholders? We already earlier talked about is that continuous delivery is bridging the gap between developers and operations and creating this DevOps concept, right? There are other players in the play too, like there's the release management teams in traditional companies. Then there are the product managers. So ability to provide a visibility and control to these different stakeholders is important, and each stakeholder has a different requirement. Like, developers want to see the logs when something goes wrong. An operation person wants to check what's deployed in production. So the visibility and control that the tool provides is important. Next, I think what you need to look at is, Gopi was just talking about in monoliths, is that, you don't want to write code. There's this thing, every if statement causes 5 bugs, right? So you want to see what sort of out-of-the-box deployment strategies are provided by the tool so that you can automate deployment and in cases of issues, you can roll back your deployments, basically managing risks during deployments, right? Like I said earlier, you can always write code to do it, but if it's supported as a first-class feature, you can depend on the reliability and the testing that the tool has gone through, not just by you, but 20 other users of that tool. And finally, I think what I'd say is that, you will not find a tool that 100% meets your functionality. That's just not how it is. So how extensible the tool is important. How easy you can extend or add functionality to the tool so that you can support your use cases. So those would be some of the things that you should look for in a tool that you want to adopt for your CD.
Right. And so now let me also stress on that DevOps model. Now, with the continuous delivery, the challenges that we see mostly in the current organizations trying to adopt it is this different groups still having manual handovers that are going on with not much of a visibility. The visibility may come in the form of multiple tools. They'll have to go look at their CI tool and issue management tool and another release management tool. And they may have another dashboard that's built, do something else that put all these together and their dependencies. So you do really need some way to have a visibility across without having to go to 10 different tools for these. And so I think that's one of the things that really improve your automation process and the delivery process.
Great. Well, so OptumX, has built its solution around Spinnaker. Can you guys talk about what are the advantages of Spinnaker versus other tools? And we actually got a question from the audience related to this, and he wanted to know kind of the advantages of Spinnaker compared to, say, Terraform and Ansible specifically.
Sure. And I think what Spinnaker provides is, I think, whatever we have been talking about, what Gopi was talking about, and what the viewer has been asking about, is that we should look at a tool that's built ground up for continuous delivery. That tendency is always there to, hey, I have a tool I can extend it and add code to do the continuous delivery part. That's always the tendency. So, we need to look at it holistically. Does the tool provide all those features I think we were talking about? So coming to what are the advantages of Spinnaker? So it's the pedigree of Spinnaker. Spinnaker is a tool that came out of Netflix. They open sourced it in 2015. And since then, a lot of big name players have contributed to its growth, and they've been using it, like Google, Amazon, Microsoft. And it's been battle tested by a lot of big name organizations. A lot of big name organizations are using it. There's a strong community behind it that's continuously adding new features, finding bugs, fixing it. So it's battle tested, battle hardened. And what I was talking about earlier also, it's a tool that's built ground up on the concepts of continuous delivery. And so yes, we in OpsumX have bet on Spinnaker as the backbone of our offerings. To just almost like summarizing the requirements of a CD tool, let me talk a little bit about the features that Spinnaker provides that makes it a pretty good tool for continuous delivery. Is like it supports multiple varieties of infrastructure resources, from Kubernetes to AWS, Azure, and even like I was seeing like Huawei Cloud, Alibaba Cloud. So a lot of people are adding providers so that you can manage them through Kubernetes, through Spinnaker. And like it's talking about, right? It provides and supports a lot of the DevOps principles, like how you deploy, roll back out of the box without you having to write a lot of code to achieve that. If you have to use Ansible, you have to write a lot of code to basically track what's running, what to roll back to, and all that. So all that's coded in, battle tested, and you just like write metadata to achieve those things. The other thing is it has an out-of-the-box integration to a lot of CI and other tools. If you go look at, they integrate with Jenkins, Maven, a lot of tools. That's basically like a session by itself, all those integrations. And if integrations is not available out of the box, it provides webhooks. Basically, if there's a REST interface, you can very easily interface with it. Or you can write simple Kubernetes jobs to basically manage those functions. So very easily extensible. And then it has very strong role-based access control. Like when you have different stakeholders using the tool, you need access control. Like you don't want developers to be able to deploy straight away to production. And operations guys should only have access to it. If you have multiple teams using the platform, you don't want, say, marketing guys going and mucking around with the finance application. So there's strong role-based access control in there. And finally, what we were talking on, Gopi was talking about this visibility across multiple stakeholders. That's built in there, very visual, the UI is good. And then it would allow you to identify bottlenecks in the system. For some of our customers, they could look at it and identify where the delivery pipeline was taking long, and Spinnaker gave them the data, and they could work and improve that delivery pipeline process. So Spinnaker is like a tool built ground up for continuous delivery. So that's why I think we adopted it, and I think we believe that it would solve most of the features we have been talking about.
And one thing I would like to add is this: having first-class integrations with cloud environments gives a very integrated view, in the sense that, for example, if you're deploying to the Kubernetes, the system knows when a deployment is stable. Let's say you have HPA-based systems that you're deploying, it knows what to look for to know when it is stable, and it gives you the feedback based on that. It also gives you the application view. Say whether you're deploying it in AWS or GCP, Azure, any of these cloud environments, Kubernetes flavors, the application that's currently running with its status is available to you. And also for the delivery, risk management, the tools like a canary analysis are available to you. And there are integrations with the tools. For example, you were mentioning Terraform. We have integrations with Terraform. You can still use Terraform for your infrastructure management, but for continuous delivery for your applications, making use of deployment strategies, canary analysis, you will still be able to use Spinnaker. And we have integrations with CloudFormation, for example. So you can use infrastructure tools or CI tools as part of your entire delivery pipeline, with Spinnaker as a view that manages this orchestration.
Great. So finally, what are scenarios that you would say, Spinnaker is not really suitable for? If a customer doesn't have certain things or is trying to do certain things, what would those be that would make Spinnaker not really suitable?
Let me take a crack at that, and Gopi, you can add more to it. So I think main thing is to look for is that, oh, I have a tool which is like a hammer and I'll apply to anything that comes across me. So that is, I think, what users need to be aware of. And the other thing is that it's a tool to manage large-scale deployments and resources. So, for a small organization or small operation, they need to look at the ROI, that it provides. So if you're doing occasional deliveries, or you have just a couple of pipelines or resources you're deploying, not much dependencies among each other, you don't have to manage much dependencies. Spinnaker will do the work for you. You can absolutely use it, but you have to basically weigh in the ROI for that. Right, Gopi, anything else you want to add to that?
You're absolutely right. So the way we think of the Spinnaker is also an excellent orchestration tool. It has cloud integrations. It has the webhooks where we can integrate third-party systems and also organizational processes. It's very good for an enterprise that's doing deployments across multiple organizations and different types of deployments. But if you're only doing one or two pipelines, like Nirmala was mentioning, you have to look at the ROI. And if you have the infrastructure automation that you're doing, then also some CloudFormation, Terraform kind of a tools would work better for you. The orchestration capability integration probably is what you need to look at, and deployment strategies is what you need to look at. But if you are very infrequent deployments, or if you're packaging your software for delivery, then Spinnaker may not be a good tool. But for most of the delivery mechanisms, Spinnaker is an excellent tool. And you can extend Spinnaker right now. Plugin process is also one of the things that we are using that makes it much more simpler to extend and use it for use cases that are not currently built in, let's say, or future-proof them.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. We've got a couple questions, and so I think this is a good time actually to transition over to our Q&A. Just to announce again to everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, you can type it into the question function in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you'd like to actually just ask a question, just hit the raise your hand button on GoToWebinar, and I will unmute you, and you can ask a question and dialogue with Nirmala and Gopi. So let's see, we do have one. Let's see, we have one or two questions. Let's get started off with. So the first one's an easy one. First one is, what are the major differences between open source Spinnaker and OpsumX's enterprise Spinnaker version?
Let me take a crack at that. So OpsMX's Spinnaker is based on top of the open source Spinnaker. We have taken the open source Spinnaker, we have not forked it, and the extensions we provide, like Gopi mentioned, Terraform plugin, and a lot of UI that we provide to make management easier are basically layered on top of open source Spinnaker. So, if you already have Spinnaker, you can add these extra functionality on top of ours. Or, if you're starting fresh, you can take our features. We add some new features like release management, audit, and then policy management. Those are things that typical enterprises need. May not be Google, Netflix needs it. So those are things that we have added on top of Spinnaker as a layer, and we provide that. Another big part of that is automated canary analysis, which is based on machine language and all that. So those are extra on top of open source Spinnaker.
Okay. Let's see, we got another question, which is, what are your thoughts on using Jenkins as a tool to implement continuous delivery? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so CI is pretty strong in most of the organizations. So when I think of this continuous delivery, they tend to extend Jenkins to also do the deployment. But one of the things that it misses is this requirement for better deployment strategies. Then they have to code them in, and the script continues to change as you have more requirements or different environments that you're dealing with. Usually it gets harder and harder to maintain those. And also the DevOps process, where you have multiple groups that are trying to coordinate with these releases, which are going really faster, the automation, the visibility, it gets harder. So that's where we feel that Jenkins is not the right tool for doing a continuous delivery. You need something like a Spinnaker, which provides those DevOps ground-up built system that gives you that capabilities.
Great.
You continue to use Jenkins for CI. I mean, that's a given.
Okay, great. We have another question, which is, somebody wrote, we have different infrastructures and are in the process of adopting Kubernetes. Should we look at different tools for Kubernetes and existing infrastructure?
I think we were talking about earlier. You probably already have tools that you're using with your existing infrastructure. Use Spinnaker for managing Kubernetes, and Spinnaker does provide interfaces or interactions with other infrastructure components. So we don't know what your environment is, but if it's say VMs or AWS resources or Azure resources, you can manage them through Spinnaker. So like as Gopi was mentioning, you should look at Spinnaker as a great orchestration tool that will manage your continuous delivery. And you should have a single tool for continuous delivery that manages the visibility and control across your processes, so that different stakeholders don't have to go to different tools to manage different things. So choose a tool that would address the continuous delivery. Use your existing infrastructure that you already have built for your existing infrastructure, integrate with this tool, and manage your continuous delivery as a platform.
Great. Okay. Here's another good one. Our biggest challenge is handover of artifacts between teams and managing the dependencies. What is the recommendation to best handle such a situation?
Yeah, this is one of the things that we see most often. So this artifact handover usually tends to be manual. In organizations, they use different tools for issue management, and then the process management systems like ServiceNow or Rally. And handovers happen through these mechanisms with the promotion approvals to product management. So one of the things that we automate or help simplify these systems is by integrating into the orchestration that we do for the releases. By codifying with this handover process and automating that, it makes it a lot simpler, and the visible and the quality overall improves. So that's one of the things that we do is recommend automate these processes, handover processes, and we provide simpler ways of getting that automated and visible to the entire team. Yeah, this is one of the interesting problems that recur and that we see, and we're passionate about solving this one.
Okay, great. You know, we have time for a few more questions, but I just wanted to put something up before we move on. Yeah, so if anybody would like us to follow up with you about after this webinar, well, a tech talk, I guess. If you'd like us to follow up with you about Spinnaker training, onboarding, support. Also, we do things called a continuous delivery strategy workshop. That's a free thing that we offer. If you'd like us to follow up with you about any of those things, I'm going to put up a poll, and you can just simply indicate in the poll, and we'll follow up with you. Additionally, if you want to follow up with us, feel free to email us at any time at hello@optimex.com. And let's see. Yeah, so anyway, if anybody would like us to follow up with you, you can just simply indicate on the poll. And let's see, why don't we take another question while we're doing that. Another question is, what do you see as the most challenging aspect of adopting CD in an organization? Who wants to take that?
Gopi, want to do that?
Yeah, sure. So as they look at the CD, the understanding of requirements for the CD is not complete, in the sense there are all these manual processes that happen right at the testing, handing over, product management, and tracking all the process. And these are not very well defined either, because there are lots of ad hoc processes that happen in between that are not fully tracked. Everyone knows that this is how the shortcuts that one can take, but it's not fully codified. So automating that becomes a challenge. So defining this process and known by everyone what is going on and how the release is happening is what we see the biggest challenge. Once we get to understanding of how these things are happening, we can get the best practices in the industry, have the recommendations, and work with the organization to figure out what fits into their environment and then automate it. Once that's done, you start seeing the benefits of CD.
Okay, great. Let's see. So everybody, we're coming towards the end here. So if you have any last questions, please either submit it in the question or raise your hand, and I'd be glad to unmute you and you can ask the question. But we've got one more here. Let's see. What are your views on tools like Tecton and Argo for adopting CD?
Yeah, so Tecton, Argo, they're focused on Kubernetes. Of course, Kubernetes is one of the most fastest growing platforms for software delivery deployment, basically running the software. So they are great tools for that. One of the things with the continuous delivery is that for us to have the view across different organizations and the release process, all of that gets hidden. You have to have additional tools that you have to bring in to know what is going on. So we see those as a good tools for the dev teams to continuously deploy, test on. But for the release process, we feel that they need to be another layer on top to make it easy for organizations to use. We have integrations with packaging systems like Helm Customize that we deliver to Kubernetes. We are looking into Tekton and Argo and see if there is a place that we can add value there for the CD while the organizations are using those.
Okay, great. We have one last question, and then we'll probably wrap it up. What roles do you see tools like ServiceNow playing in continuous delivery?
Sure. So ServiceNow or issue tracking systems are used by organizations who are not in the development organization, for example, to provide approvals or tracking the releases of the dependencies. We see those are the tools that will continue to be there, of course, for tracking, and which is why we have integrations with those tools for managing the releases. So as you go through this approval process, some of the organizations don't really do continuous delivery all the way from code to deploy with the microservices. As we were discussing, you can also use this for delivery of entire applications and monolith applications. For all of these, this additional process makes sense for organizations as they go through this journey. And so integration with those and working with what the organizations currently are using makes sense, and that's helps them move towards the CD without having to completely change their organizational process. And so we see that as a useful feature that we are adopting and integrating with our system to help organizations automate using things like ServiceNow as part of their release orchestration with Spinnaker.
Okay, great. That's the end of our questions. Did you guys have any final thoughts? Any takeaways that you want to leave with people before we wrap things up?
Sure.
Yeah, so the continuous delivery is mainstream now. As you can see, there are a lot of advantages you get in being able to deliver faster with better feedback and less time wasting in time and more reliable software. And so you should look for the right tools, process, reach out to us if you want to discuss further on these topics.
Sure, and I echo Gopi's sentiments there, is that I think the need for the hour is faster time to market. So, adopt a continuous delivery model that would allow you to have quality releases at a very fast pace is, I think, what people should look at and invest in tools that will allow them to get there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys for joining us today and providing us with this your great insights here. Appreciate it. So everybody, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we're gonna wrap things up. Please check out our webinar calendar, webinars and tech talks calendar at opsimex.com. We've got a bunch of new ones coming up in the coming weeks. We've also got a lot of new blogs and documentation on Spinnaker, all that type of stuff there to help you. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Stay safe. Are we off?
Second. Now we are.
Okay. It looks like Gopi already left. Okay.